In the heart of New York City, Isabel Grayson stood in her elegant apartment, surrounded by the soft glow of candlelight and the scent of fresh roses. She was a rising star in the fashion world, known for her breathtaking designs and her unshakable determination. Tomorrow she would marry Thomas Bradley, her college sweetheart, the man who had promised her forever. The wedding dress hung in the corner, a cascade of white silk shimmering under the chandelier. Isabel traced her fingers along its delicate fabric, imagining the life ahead, a life filled with love and dreams coming true. She smiled to herself, picturing Thomas waiting at the altar, his warm brown eyes locked on hers. But tonight something felt off. Thomas had been distant lately, claiming work kept him busy. Isabel decided to surprise him at their new Manhattan apartment, the one they had bought together for their married life. She grabbed her coat, her heart fluttering with excitement, and headed across town. The city buzzed around her, taxis honking, lights flashing, but all she could think about was seeing him. She arrived at the building, took the elevator to the penthouse floor, and unlocked the door with a quiet turn of the key. What she saw shattered her world. There, in the living room they had decorated together, Thomas stood with his arms around another woman. Not just any woman, but Madeline Grayson, Isabel's younger half-sister. Madeline's laughter filled the air, sharp and mocking as she leaned into Thomas, her dark hair falling over his shoulder. Thomas froze when he saw Isabel, his face pale, his mouth opening but no words coming out. Madeline turned, her lips curling into a smirk. "Oh, Isabel," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You're early." Isabel's chest tightened, her breath catching in her throat. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but her voice failed her. The room spun, the walls closing in. She stumbled backward, the image of Thomas and Madeline burned into her mind. Without a word, she fled, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she ran out into the night. The cold air stung her face, tears blurring her vision, but she couldn't stop. Everything she had believed in, everything she had built with Thomas, was a lie. She found herself at a sleek upscale bar in the heart of the city, a place where the elite gathered to sip expensive cocktails and trade secrets. Isabel collapsed onto a stool, her hands trembling as she ordered a drink. The bartender slid a glass of whiskey her way and she downed it in one gulp, the burn in her throat a welcome distraction from the ache in her heart. She stared into the amber liquid, replaying the scene over and over. How could Thomas do this? How could Madeline, her own sister, betray her so cruelly? A man sat down beside her, his presence commanding yet quiet. He wore a tailored suit, his dark hair neatly combed, and his eyes held a depth that drew her in. "Rough night?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Isabel glanced at him, too raw to care about appearances. "You have no idea," she muttered, taking another sip. He introduced himself as James Wentworth, CEO of Wentworth Enterprises, a name she vaguely recognized from the fashion world. They talked first about nothing, then about everything. She poured out her pain, her anger, her need to make them pay. "I want to hurt them," she said, her voice breaking. "I want them to feel what I feel." James listened, his expression unreadable, then leaned closer. "I can help with that," he said. "Come with me tonight. There's a gala across town. Be my wife for the evening. Let them see you rise above this." Isabel stared at him, the absurdity of the idea cutting through her haze of grief. But something in his gaze, a flicker of understanding, made her nod. She didn't know why, but she trusted him. An hour later, Isabel stood at the gala, transformed in a stunning gown James had somehow arranged. The room buzzed with New York's elite, designers, investors, and media moguls, all turning to look at her. James stayed by her side, his hand resting lightly on her back, his presence a shield against the world. Cameras flashed as whispers spread. "Who's that with James Wentworth?" Isabel lifted her chin, forcing a smile, knowing the news would reach Thomas and Madeline soon. For the first time that night she felt a spark of hope, a chance to reclaim her power. Little did she know, this moment would change her life forever. The morning after the gala, Isabel Grayson woke up in a guest room of James Wentworth's sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the sleek furniture and modern art on the walls. Her head ached from the whiskey and the whirlwind of the previous night, but the memory of standing beside James, facing the world with defiance, lingered like a lifeline. She pulled on a robe, her mind racing with questions. What had she agreed to? Who was this man who had stepped into her chaos without hesitation? James was waiting in the living room, a cup of coffee in hand, his dark suit impeccable as always. He looked up as she entered, his expression calm but unreadable. "Good morning," he said, gesturing to a tray of breakfast on the glass table. "I hope you slept well." Isabel sat across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Why did you help me last night?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. James took a sip of his coffee before answering. "I saw someone who needed a way out, and I needed something too, a way to break free." He explained his situation with a quiet intensity that drew her in. James was the CEO of Wentworth Enterprises, a fashion empire built by his family, but he was trapped under the thumb of his father, Edward Wentworth. Edward had arranged for James to marry Charlotte Reed, a calculating heiress from another powerful New York family, to secure a business alliance. "I can't stand her," James admitted, his jaw tightening. "She's ruthless, and my father doesn't care. He only sees profit." Isabel listened, her own pain mirrored in his words. Then James made his offer. "Stay with me, pretend to be my wife a little longer. It keeps Charlotte at bay, and it gives you a chance to show Thomas and Madeline you're not broken." Isabel hesitated, the idea both absurd and tempting. She thought of Thomas's betrayal, Madeline's smirk, and the life she had lost in a single moment. "What's in it for me beyond revenge?" she asked. James smiled faintly, the first crack in his composed facade. "A fresh start. A job at Wentworth Enterprises. You're a designer, aren't you? Show the world what you're capable of." It was an offer she couldn't refuse. She nodded, sealing the deal with a handshake that felt strangely binding. Days turned into weeks, and Isabel settled into her new role at Wentworth Enterprises. James gave her a corner office with a view of the skyline and a team to bring her designs to life. She threw herself into her work, sketching late into the night, her pencil flying across the page as she created gowns that blended elegance with rebellion. James often stopped by, leaning against the doorframe to watch her. "You're good," he said one evening, holding up a sketch of a flowing black dress with silver accents. "Better than good." Isabel blushed, unused to praise after months of feeling invisible. "Thanks," she replied, meeting his gaze. There was something in his eyes, a warmth she hadn't noticed before. Their conversations grew deeper over time. One night, as they sat on the penthouse balcony, the city lights twinkling below, James opened up about his past. "My mother, Grace, was everything to me," he said, his voice low. "She loved art, music, beauty. But my father betrayed her. He had an affair, and when she confronted him, he staged an accident to silence her. I was 10 when she died. I saw the car wreckage, the blood. I couldn't save her." Isabel reached out, her hand resting on his. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her heart aching for the boy he had been. She shared her own story in return. "My mother died when I was young, too. Cancer took her. My father remarried Eleanor Pierce a year later, and then came Madeline. I tried to love her, but she hated me from the start. She wanted everything I had, my father's attention, my success, and now Thomas." James squeezed her hand, his touch steadying her. "You're not alone anymore," he said. The words hung between them, heavy with promise. Their bond grew through small moments. One afternoon, James surprised her with a silver necklace, its pendant a tiny star. "It reminded me of you," he said simply, fastening it around her neck. His fingers brushed her skin, sending a shiver down her spine. Another evening, they stood together at the edge of his office, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Isabel felt a pull toward him, a longing she couldn't name. She caught herself wondering what it would be like to kiss him, to let this pretense become real. But doubt gnawed at her. Was this just part of the act? Could she trust him with her heart after Thomas? The line between fake and real blurred with each passing day. At a company event, James introduced her as my wife with such conviction that even Isabel almost believed it. Guests congratulated them, unaware of the truth, and Isabel played along, her arm linked with his. She caught his eye across the room later, and he smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made her pulse race. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt safe, seen, valued. But beneath the surface, questions lingered. "What are we doing?" she asked him one night, her voice soft as they sat by the fireplace. James looked at her, his expression serious. "Whatever it is, I don't want it to end." Their fragile connection was tested when Tomas appeared at her office unannounced. He stood in the doorway, his face haggard, his eyes pleading. "Isabel, I made a mistake," he said. "Madeline seduced me, but it's you I love. Give me another chance." Isabel stared at him, the man she had once adored, now a stranger. Memories of their past flooded back, picnics in Central Park, late-night talks, promises of forever. But then she saw Madeline's smirk, the apartment, the betrayal. "No," she said firmly, her voice steady. "You broke us. I'm moving on." Thomas left, defeated, and Isabel felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She turned to find James watching from the hall, his presence a quiet reassurance. That night, as she sat alone in her office sketching under the dim light, Isabel realized something had shifted inside her. James wasn't just a means to an end anymore. He was someone she cared about, someone who saw her when no one else did. She touched the star necklace, a symbol of their growing bond, and wondered if this could be love. But the world outside was closing in. Madeline and Eleanor were plotting, Charlotte was lurking, and Edward's shadow loomed large. Isabel knew the peace she had found with James wouldn't last. Trouble was coming, and it would test everything they had built. Weeks had passed since Isabel Grayson agreed to James Wentworth's unconventional deal, and life at Wentworth Enterprises had become her anchor. Her office buzzed with activity, her team bringing her latest designs to life, fabrics and sketches scattered across tables. She thrived in the chaos, her talent shining brighter with every project. James often lingered nearby, offering quiet praise or a nod of approval, his presence a steady comfort in her new world. Their bond had deepened, unspoken feelings threading through their every interaction, but Isabel kept her guard up, wary of trusting too much too soon. Trouble brewed beneath the surface, and it began with a visit from Madeline Grayson. Isabel's half-sister stormed into her office one crisp morning, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Madeline's dark eyes flashed with resentment, her perfectly styled hair framing a face twisted with anger. "You think you can just waltz into my life and take everything?" she spat, slamming a folder onto Isabel's desk. Inside were documents claiming Isabel had stolen one of Madeline's designs, a sleek gown with bold geometric patterns, now featured in Wentworth's upcoming collection. "I created that," Madeline insisted. "You're a thief." Isabel stared at the papers, her stomach sinking. She recognized the design, but it was her own, sketched months ago in the quiet of her old apartment. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice firm despite the rising panic. "I don't steal, you know that." Madeline smirked, crossing her arms. "Tell that to the lawyers. Mother and I are suing you. You'll lose everything, just like you deserve." Before Isabel could respond, Madeline turned and left, leaving a storm of doubt in her wake. The accusation spread like wildfire through New York's fashion circles. Whispers followed Isabel at every meeting, colleagues exchanging glances, clients questioning her integrity. She confronted James that evening in his office, the city skyline glowing beyond the glass walls. "They're trying to ruin me," she said, handing him the legal notice. "Madeline and Eleanor want me out of the picture." James scanned the document, his jaw tightening. "This is nonsense," he said. "I've seen your work. This is yours. I'll handle it." True to his word, James mobilized his legal team, top attorneys from Manhattan's finest firms. They dug into Madeline's claims, uncovering inconsistencies in her timeline, proving Isabel's sketches predated the alleged theft. Within days, the lawsuit was dismissed, but the damage lingered. Isabel felt exposed, her reputation bruised, and she couldn't shake the sting of her sister's betrayal. "Why does she hate me so much?" she asked James one night, staring out at the twinkling lights from his balcony. He stood beside her, his voice low. "She's jealous. You have what she wants: talent, strength, a place here. She'll never forgive you for that." As Isabel grappled with her family's attack, a new threat emerged. Charlotte Reed entered the scene, her arrival announced by a flurry of media attention at a Wentworth Enterprises gala. Tall and striking, with auburn hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, Charlotte was Edward Wentworth's choice for James's bride. She approached Isabel during the event, her tone deceptively sweet. "So you're the famous wife," she said, sipping champagne. "James has told me so much about you. Quite the Cinderella story." Isabel bristled at the condescension, but held her composure. "I'm here to work," she replied, "not to play games." Charlotte's next move proved she was no stranger to games. Days later, rumors surfaced in the press, vicious lies claiming Madeline had a history of plagiarism, her career built on stolen ideas. The stories painted her as a fraud, her reputation crumbling overnight. Clients dropped her, sponsors pulled funding, and Madeline's name became a punchline in the industry. Isabel read the headlines in her office, confusion warring with unease. She hadn't orchestrated this. Who had? She found James in the boardroom, his expression grim as he scrolled through his tablet. "Did you do this?" she asked, holding up a newspaper with Madeline's face splashed across it. James shook his head. "No, but I know who did." He explained Charlotte's handiwork, her calculated strike to warn Isabel. "She's sending a message," he said. "Stay out of her way, or you're next." Isabel's hands clenched into fists. "She's destroying my sister to get to me." "That's insane." James met her gaze, his voice steady. "That's Charlotte. She doesn't care who she hurts as long as she wins." The fallout hit hard. Madeline called Isabel late one night, her voice raw with fury. "You did this," she accused. "You and your precious James. You couldn't stand me having anything, so you took it all." Isabel tried to explain. "I had nothing to do with it. This is someone else's doing." But Madeline hung up, her words echoing in Isabel's ears. She felt a pang of guilt, not for Madeline's actions, but for the fractured family they had become. Eleanor's silence only deepened the rift, her absence a sign she was plotting something worse. James stood by Isabel through the chaos, his support unwavering. One afternoon, as they reviewed designs in her office, he paused, his hand brushing hers. "You're stronger than they realize," he said. "That's why they're afraid of you." Isabel looked at him, his words igniting a flicker of hope. "And you?" she asked. "What do you see in me?" He hesitated, then spoke softly. "Someone worth fighting for. Someone I'd save again if I had to." The air between them shifted, charged with something unspoken. That moment was interrupted by a memory surfacing in Isabel's mind, a fleeting image of waves crashing, a hand pulling her from the water. "6 years ago," she said suddenly, her eyes widening. "Hamptons, the beach. That was you, wasn't it?" James nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "You were drowning. I couldn't let you go." The revelation hit her like a wave, connecting their past to this tangled present. "Well, didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked. He shrugged. "I didn't want you to feel indebted. I wanted you to stay because you chose to." Their conversation was cut short by a knock at the door. Thomas Bradley stepped inside, his face drawn, his posture slumped. Isabel tensed, memories of his betrayal flooding back. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone cold. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "I need to talk to you. Alone." James moved to leave, but Isabel stopped him. "Stay," she said. "He doesn't get to dictate anything anymore." Thomas swallowed hard, then spoke. "I messed up, Isabel. Madeline came on to me and I was weak. I never stopped loving you. Please, give me a chance to make it right." Isabel stared at him, the man she had once built her future around. She remembered their laughter, their dreams, the way he used to hold her hand. But those memories were tainted now, overshadowed by his choice to turn to Madeline. "You made your bed," she said, her voice steady. "Lie in it. I'm done with you." Thomas's shoulders sagged, defeat written across his face. "You've changed," he muttered, then walked out, leaving silence in his wake. James stepped closer, his hand resting on her shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. Isabel nodded, though her heart ached. "I will be," she said, meeting his gaze. "Thanks to you." He smiled, a rare softness breaking through his usual reserve. "We're in this together now," he said. The words felt like a promise, a lifeline amid the storm brewing around them. But the storm was far from over. Madeline's humiliation fueled her rage. Eleanor's schemes grew darker, and Charlotte's shadow loomed larger. Isabel sensed the tension building, a web of deceit tightening around her. She glanced at James, his strength a beacon in the chaos, and knew they would face it together. What she didn't know was how far her enemies would go, or the price they would all pay when the truth came crashing down. The air at Wentworth Enterprises crackled with anticipation as Isabel Grayson prepared for the biggest night of her career. The company's annual fashion gala was underway, a glittering event held in a grand ballroom overlooking the Hudson River. Designers, critics, and New York's elite filled the space, their voices blending with the soft hum of a string quartet. Isabel stood backstage, adjusting the final stitches on her centerpiece gown, a flowing masterpiece of midnight blue and gold. This was her moment to prove herself, to rise above the whispers and accusations that had haunted her. James Wentworth watched her from the sidelines, his dark suit blending into the shadows. He had been her rock through the chaos, his belief in her unwavering. As she caught his eye, he offered a small nod, a silent promise of support. Isabel smiled back, her nerves settling. The past weeks had tested them, with Madeline's lawsuit and Charlotte's schemes threatening to tear her down, but tonight felt like a turning point. She stepped onto the runway as the lights dimmed, the crowd falling silent. Her collection dazzled, each piece a testament to her resilience, and the applause that followed washed over her like a wave of redemption. But the triumph was short-lived. As Isabel returned backstage, Madeline Grayson emerged from the crowd, her face a mask of fury. She wore a sleek black dress, her presence sharp and menacing. "You think you've won?" she hissed, stepping closer. "You took everything from me. My career, my pride. I'll make you pay." Before Isabel could react, Madeline pulled a knife from her clutch, the blade glinting under the stage lights. Gasps rippled through the crew as Isabel stumbled back, her heart pounding. "Madeline, stop," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "This isn't the answer." Madeline lunged, her rage blinding her to reason. Time slowed as Isabel braced herself, but a figure darted between them. Thomas Bradley, his face pale with determination, threw himself in front of her. The knife struck his chest and he staggered, blood staining his shirt. Isabel screamed, catching him as he fell, his weight pulling her to the floor. "Thomas!" she cried, pressing her hands against the wound, her fingers slick with red. His eyes met hers, clouded with pain but steady. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice fading. "I loved you. Always." His breath rattled, then stopped, his body going limp in her arms. The room erupted in chaos, security rushing to subdue Madeline, guests shouting in panic. Isabel knelt there, frozen, tears streaming down her face as she cradled Thomas. His sacrifice shattered her, a flood of guilt and grief washing away the anger she had held for so long. She had hated him for his betrayal, but in his final act he had given her everything he had left. James reached her side, kneeling beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "Isabel," he said softly, pulling her gently away as paramedics arrived. She clung to him, sobbing into his chest, the weight of loss overwhelming her. But the night's horrors were far from over. As security dragged Madeline away, her wild laughter echoing through the hall, Charlotte Reed seized her chance. She had slipped backstage during the commotion, her cold eyes fixed on Isabel, With a signal to 2 hired men, she orchestrated a swift abduction. The men grabbed Isabel, their grips bruising her arms, and dragged her out a side exit before James could react. She fought, kicking and twisting, but a cloth pressed over her mouth silenced her cries, darkness swallowing her as she lost consciousness. Isabel woke in a dimly lit warehouse, the air thick with dust and the distant hum of the city. Her hands were bound, her body slumped against a metal chair. Charlotte stood before her, her auburn hair gleaming under a flickering bulb, a folder in her hands. "You've caused me a lot of trouble," she said, her voice icy. "James was mine until you came along. Sign this." She tossed the folder at Isabel's feet, revealing documents that would transfer Isabel's shares in Wentworth Enterprises to Charlotte. "Do it, and you walk away. Refuse, and you don't walk at all." Isabel glared at her, defiance burning through her fear. "You're delusional," she said. "James will never love you, no matter what you do to me." Charlotte's smile tightened, her composure cracking. "He'll have no choice when you're gone," she replied, stepping closer. "Edward's already on my side. He'll cut James off if he doesn't marry me. This is your last chance." Isabel shook her head, her voice steady. "I'd rather die than give you anything." Charlotte's patience snapped. She raised her hand to strike, but a crash interrupted her. The warehouse door burst open and James stormed in, his face a mask of fury. Behind him were his security team, their weapons drawn. "Let her go," he roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. Charlotte spun to face him, her confidence faltering. "James, you don't understand," she said, her tone pleading. "This is for us. She's nothing." James ignored her, rushing to Isabel's side as his men subdued Charlotte's hired muscle. He untied her, his hands trembling as he pulled her into his arms. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his breath ragged. Isabel shook her head, clinging to him, her body shaking from the ordeal. "I'm okay," she whispered. "You found me." James held her tighter, his voice breaking. "I'd tear this city apart to find you." Charlotte lunged forward, desperate, but security pinned her down, her screams fading as they dragged her away. Back at the penthouse, James explained the stakes. "My father threatened to disown me if I didn't leave you," he said, pacing the room. "He sent Charlotte after you to force my hand. He thinks I'll cave." Isabel stood, her strength returning as she took his hand. "What do we do?" she asked. James turned to her, his eyes fierce with resolve. "We fight," he said. "I have evidence of his crimes, tax evasion, fraud. He's done worse than you know. I'll take him down, but I need you with me." Isabel nodded, her heart swelling with trust. "I'm with you," she said. "Always." James pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead, a silent vow between them. She thought of Thomas, his final act of redemption, and felt a bittersweet peace. He had given her a second chance and she wouldn't waste it. But the battle wasn't over. Edward Wentworth still loomed, his power a dark shadow over their future. James had defied him to save her, and now they faced the consequences together. The night stretched on, Isabel sitting by the fireplace, James beside her. She touched the star necklace he had given her, its weight a reminder of their bond. "I didn't think I could feel this again," she admitted, her voice soft. "Safe, wanted." James looked at her, his gaze intense. "You're more than wanted," he said. "You're everything to me." The words hung in the air, a confession that bridged their past and present. Isabel leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder, and for a moment, the world outside faded away. But danger lingered, a storm gathering strength. Madeline's arrest wouldn't silence her hatred, Charlotte's defeat only fueled her desperation, and Edward's wrath waited to strike. Isabel knew the cost of this night. Thomas's blood on her hands, the scars it left on her soul. Yet with James beside her, she felt ready to face it all. Their love, forged in fire, would be their shield. The final reckoning was coming, and it would test every ounce of their courage. The days following the chaotic gala were a blur for Isabel Grayson. But James Wentworth refused to let the storm consume them. Holed up in his penthouse, they planned their next move against Edward Wentworth, the man who had orchestrated so much of their pain. Isabel sat at the dining table, papers spread before her, while James paced, his phone pressed to his ear. He had spent hours with his lawyers piecing together evidence of Edward's crimes, tax evasion records, fraudulent deals, and hidden accounts that stretched back decades. "This ends now," he told her, his voice steady with resolve. "He won't control us anymore." Isabel nodded, her hands steady as she reviewed the documents. She thought of Thomas Bradley, his lifeless body in her arms, his final words echoing in her mind. His sacrifice had given her clarity, a fierce determination to fight for the life she deserved. "We'll do this together," she said, meeting James's gaze. He stopped pacing, crossing the room to take her hand. "Together," he repeated, his touch grounding her. The weight of their shared losses hung between them, but so did a growing hope, a promise of something better beyond the darkness. James acted swiftly. He leaked the evidence to the authorities, tipping off the IRS and FBI with meticulous files that left no room for doubt. Within hours, news broke across New York, headlines screaming about Edward Wentworth's arrest. Television screens flashed images of him in handcuffs, his stern face twisted with disbelief as agents escorted him from his lavish Upper East Side mansion. Isabel watched from the penthouse, the city skyline a silent witness to his downfall. "It's over," she whispered, relief washing over her. James stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "Not quite," he said. "There's more to settle." Charlotte Reed's fate came next. After her failed attempt to force Isabel's hand in the warehouse, James's security team had handed her over to the police. The charges piled up: kidnapping, assault, conspiracy, each one backed by witness statements and surveillance footage from the gala. Charlotte's trial was swift, her polished demeanor crumbling as the judge sentenced her to years behind bars. Isabel saw the news on her phone, Charlotte's mugshot staring back at her, a hollow shell of the woman who had once wielded power like a weapon. "She got what she deserved," James said, his tone firm. Isabel nodded, though a flicker of pity stirred within her. Hate had destroyed Charlotte, just as it had nearly destroyed them all. Madeline Grayson faced her own reckoning. The Bradley family, devastated by Thomas's death, pressed charges against her for his murder. Isabel attended the trial, sitting in the back of the courtroom, her heart heavy as evidence unfolded. Madeline's knife, her fingerprints, the security footage from the gala, it all painted a damning picture. She took the stand, her voice shrill with defiance. "Isabel drove me to it," she claimed, her eyes wild. "She took everything from me." The jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for less than a day before returning a guilty verdict, sentencing Madeline to life in prison. Isabel left the courthouse in silence, the weight of her sister's choices pressing on her chest. Eleanor Pierce, Madeline's mother and Isabel's stepmother, tried one last desperate move. She showed up at the penthouse a week after the trial, her face gaunt, her once impeccable attire disheveled. "Isabel," she pleaded, standing in the doorway James had reluctantly opened. "We're ruined. The Grayson name is nothing now. Help us, your family." Isabel stepped forward, her expression cold. "Family?" she said, her voice cutting through the air. "You turned Madeline against me. You tried to destroy me. You don't get to ask for help now." Eleanor's shoulders slumped, tears streaking her face, but Isabel didn't waver. "Leave," she said, "and don't come back." James closed the door behind Eleanor, the final thread of her old life severed. With their enemies vanquished, Isabel and James turned to healing. The wounds of the past lingered, Thomas's death a scar on her heart, the betrayal of her family a quiet ache. But James's presence softened the pain, his strength a balm she hadn't known she needed. One evening, as spring painted New York in shades of green, he took her hand and led her to the rooftop. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, simple yet stunning, a single diamond catching the fading light. "This isn't pretend anymore," he said, his voice low. "Marry me, Isabel. For real this time." Isabel's breath caught, her eyes searching his. She saw the boy who had saved her from the waves 6 years ago, the man who had stood by her through every storm. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling with joy. James slipped the ring onto her finger, pulling her into a kiss that felt like a beginning. The city stretched out below them, a canvas of possibilities, and for the first time, Isabel believed in forever again. They planned a small wedding, far from the chaos of Manhattan. The Hamptons beckoned, its beaches a quiet refuge where their story had unknowingly begun. On a warm June day, Isabel walked across the sand in a flowing white dress, barefoot and free, her star necklace glinting at her throat. James waited by the water's edge, his suit jacket discarded, his smile wide and unguarded. A handful of close friends gathered, the ocean breeze carrying their laughter. The officiant spoke of love and resilience, words that resonated deep within Isabel's soul. When it was time for their vows, James went first, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Isabel, you came into my life when I'd forgotten how to feel," he said, holding her hands. "You brought light to my shadows, strength to my fight. I promise to stand by you, to love you, to build a life where you'll never doubt your worth." Tears welled in Isabel's eyes as she squeezed his hands. "James," she began, her voice soft but clear, "you saved me, not just from the water, but from myself. You gave me hope when I had none. I promise to be your partner, your home, through every storm and every sunrise." They exchanged rings, the waves crashing gently behind them, and sealed their vows with a kiss. The small crowd cheered, clapping as James lifted Isabel into his arms, spinning her on the sand. She laughed, the sound bright and unrestrained, a melody of joy she hadn't known she could still play. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, a perfect backdrop to their new chapter. Later, as the reception faded into a quiet night, Isabel slipped away to visit Thomas' grave. It lay in a small cemetery nearby, a simple stone marking his final rest. She knelt beside it, her fingers tracing his name. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking, "for giving me a chance to live again. I'll never forget you." A breeze rustled the trees, carrying her words away, and she felt a peace settle over her, a release from the guilt that had lingered since that fateful night. James found her there, his footsteps soft on the grass. He didn't speak, just knelt beside her, his hand resting on her back. They stayed in silence, the weight of loss mingling with the promise of their future. When Isabel stood, she took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "Let's go home," she said, her voice steady. James nodded, leading her back to the beach house they now shared, a place where they could start anew. The days that followed were filled with quiet moments, sketching together in the morning light, walking hand in hand along the shore, building a life free from the shadows of their past. Wentworth Enterprises thrived under their joint vision, Isabel's designs earning acclaim, James's leadership steering the company to new heights. They faced the world as partners, their love a fortress against any lingering doubts. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the stars, Isabel leaned against James, her head on his shoulder. "We made it," she said, her voice a mix of wonder and gratitude. He kissed her forehead, his arm tightening around her. "We did," he replied. "And we'll keep making it, every day." The night stretched out before them, infinite and bright, a testament to a love that had conquered betrayal, loss, and vengeance. Isabel closed her eyes, the sound of the waves a lullaby, and knew she had found her forever.